Sister Wives fans thought they had already seen the ugliest chapters of the Brown family saga. But what's unfolding now may be the most explosive turn yet, because for the first time ever, the spotlight isn't just on failed marriages or emotional betrayal, it's on money, property, and a trail of decisions that fans believe simply do not add up. And what makes this moment so intense is that the people once united in protecting the family image now appear to be turning on each other, with Kody and Robyn suddenly finding themselves at the center of questions they can no longer dodge, all while Meri, the quiet original wife, may have unknowingly blown the lid off everything. If you think you understand what happened with Coyote Pass, the Flagstaff move, or those mysterious mortgages, stay with me, because the deeper you go, the messier this gets. And by the end of this video, you might see the entire Sister Wives story very differently. For years, fans accepted the narrative that Kody Brown was simply overwhelmed, stretched thin between for marriages, financial strain, and a dream of plural unity that slowly collapsed. But what many viewers are now re-examining is how often money problems seem to follow the same pattern, especially once Robyn entered the family and major financial decisions began to shift. We're talking about repeated moves, rushed home purchases, uneven debt disclosures, and a string of explanations that never quite aligned with what fans could see on screen. At the time, it was easy to brush it off as chaos. Now, with hindsight, fans are asking a much sharper question. Was it chaos, or was it something more calculated? Here's where things get uncomfortable. When the Browns moved to Flagstaff, it was sold as a fresh start, a strategic decision for the family's future. But almost immediately, viewers noticed inconsistencies. Robyn insisted she couldn't buy because of credit issues tied to her past, yet not long after, she and Kody secured an expensive home with a mortgage structure. That raised eyebrows among financially savvy fans. Meanwhile, Meri, who had long maintained steady income through her business ventures, was portrayed as financially independent but emotionally isolated. Christine eventually walked away. Janelle later admitted she had little to show for years of financial contribution, and suddenly, the question shifted from who loved whom to who paid for what. This is where Meri's role becomes critical and possibly unintentional. Over the past few seasons, Meri has made comments that, at the time, felt like emotional venting, but when those comments are lined up chronologically, they start to resemble something else entirely, a timeline. Meri has spoken openly about putting money into the family, about believing in shared assets, and about trusting Kody's leadership when it came to finances. She's also admitted she didn't always understand where the money was going, only that she was expected to contribute. That alone isn't scandalous. But when fans compared her statements to public property records and mortgage filings, the discrepancies became impossible to ignore. Now, before we go any further, let's be very clear. No court has ruled that fraud occurred. No official charges exist. What we're discussing are alleged inconsistencies, patterns, and public records that fans, financial commentators, and longtime viewers are questioning. And that distinction matters, but it also doesn't erase the tension building around Kody and Robyn. Because what's new is that their own explanations no longer line up with each other. Recently, Kody has suggested that financial decisions were made collectively, that everyone agreed, that everyone understood the risks. Robyn, on the other hand, has implied that she relied heavily on Kody's guidance and trusted him to handle the details. That difference may seem subtle, but in situations involving mortgages and shared assets, it's everything. If one party claims joint responsibility while the other emphasizes dependence, it creates a gap. And gaps are where suspicion grows. Here's the hook you need to hold onto. Families don't usually unravel over romance alone. They unravel over money. And Sister Wives is no exception. Fans have begun revisiting early episodes, and what they're finding is fascinating. Robyn entered the family with debt, which was openly discussed, The family allegedly helped pay it down so she could qualify for a home. At the time, this was framed as unity, but fast forward years later, and Janelle reveals she has no real assets in her name despite decades of contribution. Christine walks away with the home she purchased independently. Meri retains her business income, and Robyn ends up in the most secure housing position of all. If that doesn't immediately raise questions, it should. Let me ask you this, and drop your answer in the comments because this matters for the rest of the story. Do you believe Kody treated all wives equally when it came to money, or do you think financial favoritism played a bigger role than he ever admitted as tensions rise? Something even more revealing happens. Kody begins expressing frustration not just with his former wives, but with the public narrative itself. He bristles at accusations, deflects responsibility, and repeatedly frames himself as misunderstood. Robyn, meanwhile, appears increasingly emotional, often insisting she never wanted this outcome, that she wanted unity, that she didn't benefit at anyone else's expense. But intent and outcome are two very different things, and viewers are no longer satisfied with emotional explanations when the numbers tell a different story. This is where the alleged mortgage issue takes center stage. Fans analyzing records notice changes in ownership structures, refinancing timelines, and reported income sources that seemed, at best, confusing. Again, confusing does not mean illegal. But when confusion benefits one household more than others, people start asking why. And when Meri casually references financial sacrifices she made believing the family would eventually build together on Coyote Pass, the implication is devastating. That land never materialized into shared homes. Instead, it became a symbol of broken promises and frozen capital. Now here's the moment that changed everything. During candid conversations, Meri acknowledged that she believed in the plan longer than anyone else. She trusted it, she funded it, and she waited. That admission alone reframes the entire financial narrative. Because if Meri, often portrayed as distant or disengaged, was still contributing financially while receiving none of the emotional or practical benefits, then the system was already deeply imbalanced, and imbalance is exactly what leads to the current situation, where Kody and Robyn appear to be quietly distancing themselves from accountability, not outwardly accusing each other, not directly blaming, but subtly shifting language. And in legal and financial contexts, language matters more than feelings. If you're still watching right now, hit that subscribe button, because what comes next connects dots most fans haven't fully pieced together yet. And you won't want to miss how the story escalates. What makes this even more compelling is how silence has become part of the story. No clear breakdown, no transparent accounting, no sit-down explanation addressing the concerns head-on. Instead, viewers are left with fragments, half-statements, and emotional deflections, and when reality TV avoids clarity, audiences assume there's a reason. As we move deeper into this analysis, keep this in mind. Every time someone says they trusted someone else with the details, it raises the question of who actually held the pen. And when millions of dollars in property are involved, that question doesn't stay hypothetical for long. In part 2, we're going to break down the financial timeline step by step, including how ownership shifted, how expectations were set, and why fans believe the alleged mortgage inconsistencies became impossible to ignore once Meri finally spoke up. Before you move on, share this video with another Sister Wives fan and ask them this one question: do you think this was poor planning or something far more intentional? Picking up right where we left off, this is where the Sister Wives story stops feeling like emotional fallout and starts feeling like a slow-motion financial unraveling. Because once fans began laying everything out in order, season by season, move by move, the timeline revealed patterns that were impossible to ignore. What looked random on TV suddenly felt structured, and what felt emotional suddenly had numbers attached to it. And that's when the alleged mortgage questions really started to heat up. When the Browns arrived in Flagstaff, the plan was sold as simple and unified: buy land, build homes, regroup as a family. But almost immediately, that plan fractured. Coyote Pass sat untouched while individual housing decisions took priority. And those decisions were not evenly distributed. Christine bought a home in her own name. Janelle rented, then later admitted she invested heavily into the land instead of securing a house. Meri rented expensive properties while maintaining independent income. And Robyn, despite earlier claims of financial obstacles, ended up purchasing the largest and most secure home alongside Kody. That alone may not sound alarming, but the order and explanations behind these moves are what triggered scrutiny. Fans began asking a basic question that still hasn't been answered clearly. If the family was truly pooling resources for a shared future, why did some wives end up with assets while others ended up with promises? Janelle's later confession that she had very little to show financially after decades in the marriage hit viewers hard because it directly contradicted the idea of equal partnership. And once that statement was out there, people went back and rewatched older episodes with new eyes. This is where Meri's comments took on new weight. She has repeatedly stated that she believed in the collective vision longer than anyone else. She talked about contributing financially while emotionally sidelined, about trusting Kody's leadership, and about assuming that what she put in would eventually come back to her through shared property and stability. That trust is critical to understand, because trust is what allows one person to sign paperwork without scrutinizing every line. And when trust is broken, those signatures start to feel very different in hindsight. What intensified the alleged mortgage concerns was how often explanations changed. At different points, viewers were told homes couldn't be purchased because of credit issues, timing issues, or market pressure. Yet those same obstacles seemed to vanish when it came to Robyn and Kody's purchase. Again, that does not prove wrongdoing, but it does create a pattern where financial barriers appeared selectively inconvenient. And when Kody later stated that each wife was responsible for her own choices, it directly conflicted with earlier messaging about shared responsibility. This contradiction is where fans believe Kody and Robyn began indirectly exposing each other. Kody leaned into the idea that everyone made their own decisions and understood the risks. Robyn leaned into the idea that she followed Kody's lead and trusted his judgment. Those two narratives cannot fully coexist. One implies equal agency. The other implies reliance, and in any financial dispute, that difference matters. Let's talk about Coyote Pass for a moment because it's central to everything. The land was framed as the family's future, the great unifier. Multiple wives contributed money toward it instead of securing homes, but years passed, and nothing was built when Christine left. She walked away cleanly. When Janelle left, she walked away frustrated and financially vulnerable. Meri stayed tied emotionally and financially to a vision that never materialized. And Robyn stayed in a completed home. That contrast is the heart of the tension. If you're still with me, take a second and comment below. Do you think the Coyote Pass plan was ever realistic? Or was it always a holding pattern that benefited some more than others? As the family fractured, so did accountability instead of a clear financial reckoning. The audience saw emotional blame. Kody blamed disloyalty. Robyn blamed misunderstanding. The other wives blamed broken promises, but none of those explanations addressed the core issue, which is where the money went and who benefited from the decisions that were made. And when that question isn't answered directly, speculation fills the gap. What really fueled online discussion was how calm Meri remained through it all. While others expressed anger or grief, Meri spoke in measured tones about believing, contributing, and waiting. That calmness made her statements feel credible rather than reactive. And when fans connected her words to public property records and timelines, they began to suspect that her loyalty may have unintentionally shielded decisions she didn't. fully understand at the time. This is an important moment to pause and say this clearly. Alleged mortgage inconsistencies do not equal proven fraud, but allegations don't arise in a vacuum. They rise when stories don't match records, when outcomes don't match intentions, and when those who sacrifice the most end up with the least. And that is exactly why viewers are so invested in this chapter of the Sister Wives story. Now here's a strong mid-video hook, so don't click away. The most revealing part of this entire situation may not be what was signed, but what was never discussed openly on camera: silence. Silence around refinancing. Silence around ownership percentages. Silence around what would happen if the family dissolved. Those are the conversations that matter most, and they're the ones we never saw. If this analysis is making you rethink the entire series, hit the like button and share this with another fan, because the final piece of this story ties everything together in a way that explains why the fallout looks the way it does today. As tensions escalated, Kody's language shifted from leadership to resentment. He spoke about sacrifice, about being misunderstood, about carrying burdens alone. But leadership comes with responsibility, especially when others are trusting you with their financial futures. Robyn's language shifted too, but in a different direction. She emphasized fear, uncertainty, and dependence. That emotional framing may be genuine, but it also distances her from decision-making power. And that's exactly why fans feel like they're watching a quiet game of blame avoidance rather than accountability. So here we are, with a family once united by faith and vision, now divided by outcomes. The alleged mortgage issue isn't just about legality, it's about trust. Who trusted whom, who benefited, and who was left exposed when everything fell apart. And that's why this story refuses to fade away. Before we move into the final part, I want to ask you one more question, and I really want to see your thoughts in the comments. If the roles were reversed and Meri or Janelle had ended up in the most secure position, do you think this story would be viewed differently in part 3? We're going to confront the emotional and public fallout head-on, including why Kody and Robyn now seem more isolated than ever, why fans believe the truth may never be fully clarified, and what this entire saga teaches us about power, money, and loyalty inside reality TV families. Stay with me, because the final chapter is where everything finally collides. This is where everything finally collides. Because by the time we reach the current state of the Brown family, the emotional damage and the financial fallout are no longer separate stories. They're the same story told from different angles. And the reason this chapter feels so unresolved is because it forces viewers to sit with something deeply uncomfortable. There is no dramatic courtroom moment, no single confession, no neat conclusion. Instead, there's isolation, resentment, and a silence that feels louder than any argument ever shown on camera. And that silence is exactly why fans believe Kody and Robyn are now unintentionally exposing each other, not through accusations, but through what they refuse to clarify. As the family fractured publicly, something subtle but powerful happened. Kody lost the role he had always relied on, the unquestioned leader whose decisions were trusted even when they hurt. Without that authority, his explanations began to sound defensive. Instead of directive, he talked about betrayal, loyalty, and respect, but rarely about numbers, agreements, or outcomes. Robyn, on the other hand, leaned into emotional vulnerability, often presenting herself as confused, overwhelmed, and heartbroken by the collapse of the family. On their own, those responses might make sense. Together, they create a contradiction that fans can't stop dissecting. Here's the tension that refuses to go away. If Kody was the decision maker, then responsibility follows him. If Robyn was merely trusting and following, then she benefited from decisions she didn't control. But if Robyn was actively involved in planning, then her claims of dependence don't fully hold. That unresolved question sits at the center of the alleged mortgage controversy. Because financial systems don't care about emotions, they care about who signed, who benefited, and who was left exposed when everything fell apart. Meri's role in this final chapter is almost tragic in its quietness. While Christine and Janelle found their voices through departure and anger, Meri's voice came through reflection. She didn't rage, she didn't accuse, she simply stated what she believed, what she gave, and what never came back to her. And that's why fans believe her words carry so much weight. When someone has nothing left to gain and nothing left to protect, their honesty feels different. Her admissions didn't accuse anyone of wrongdoing, but they did expose a system built on trust without safeguards. And this is where the story becomes bigger than sister wives. It becomes about power dynamics in families where finances are pooled, but control is not. It becomes about what happens when loyalty replaces transparency. It becomes about how easily good intentions can turn into long-term damage when accountability is avoided. The alleged mortgage inconsistencies matter not because they may or may not cross a legal line, but because they symbolize how uneven outcomes can grow out of uneven decision-making. If you've made it this far, this is your moment to engage, because your perspective matters. Do you think the Browns were victims of poor planning and emotional decision-making? Or do you believe some people knew exactly how this would end and moved accordingly? Drop your thoughts in the comments because this debate is far from settled. What makes the current moment so tense is how isolated Kody and Robyn now appear. Once surrounded by a large family and constant affirmation, they are now left defending themselves against public scrutiny without the buffer of shared responsibility. Every statement is analyzed, every pause is questioned, and every refusal to explain details feels intentional, even if it isn't. In the court of public opinion, silence is rarely interpreted as innocence. It's interpreted as avoidance. This is also why many fans believe the full truth may never be revealed. Not because there's necessarily something criminal to hide, but because acknowledging the reality would require admitting that the system failed, that trust was misplaced, and that some people paid a much higher price than others. That kind of admission is devastating, especially when your identity has been built on leading a family through faith, unity, and shared purpose. Here's the final hook, and it's the one that lingers long after the episode ends. Sister wives didn't collapse because love ran out, it collapsed because trust was spent without a receipt. And once trust is gone, every past decision gets re-examined through a harsher lens. That's why the alleged mortgage issue won't disappear. It represents all the questions that were never answered when they should have been. Before this video ends, take a second to like and subscribe if you want more deep dives like this, because stories like these deserve context, not just headlines. And share this with someone who's followed sister wives from the beginning, because they'll understand just how heavy this chapter really is as the dust settles. One thing is undeniable: Meri didn't just walk away from a marriage, she walked away from a belief system she trusted for decades. Janelle didn't just lose a relationship, she lost financial security she assumed was guaranteed. Christine didn't just leave emotionally, she left strategically. And Kody and Robyn didn't just end up together, they ended up alone, carrying the weight of decisions that no longer have anyone else to absorb the blame. So the real question isn't whether alleged mortgage fraud occurred. The real question is this: when everything was on the line, who protected themselves and who trusted the system to protect them? That's the question fans will keep asking long after the cameras stop rolling. Let me know in the comments if you believe the truth will ever be fully explained, or if this is one of those reality TV stories where closure was never part of the contract.